So, like some of you, I had the incredibly interesting experience of celebrating my birthday during quarantine. I just celebrated my 24th birthday, and over the past year, I've noticed that I've been saying something that I never thought I would say at my age. And that is, when I was your age, if you've ever been around people that are older than you for a long period of time, then you might have noticed that they begin some sentences or stories with this phrase, when I was your age. Our grandparents say, when I was your age, I used to have to walk 20 miles in the snow just to get to school, and I loved every minute of it. And our parents say, well, we didn't have smartphones or Google or video games when we were your age, and we turned out just fine. And when we all have kids, or when you have kids, you're going to be able to say things like, when I was your age, I did school online. When I was your age, I survived a global pandemic. I remember hearing this phrase all the time from my family members as a kid and as a teenager, but I just never thought that the day would come when I would say this phrase myself. Because as a teenager, every time I heard this phrase, it made me feel small or lazy or unheard. Because it was like people that were older than me were comparing me to themselves, and I was always the lesser in the comparison. And because of how it made me feel, I was determined that I was never going to make anyone feel that way. And in order to do so, I would never say, when I was your age. But here's the thing, I found myself saying this more and more as I've hung out with all of you, and I've just spent time with the next generation in general. But I've noticed that I'm not really saying it to compare myself. It's more of a reference for me about how much things really have changed since I was younger. We didn't have smart cars when I was a teenager. We didn't have access to whatever music we wanted at any given moment. We had texting, but we didn't have Snapchat. We didn't have recliners in movie theaters. And honestly, I love absolutely every one of those changes, but they're just so different from when I was your guys' age. And while these things certainly have changed from generation to generation, and while many, many things have changed during the coronavirus, there is one thing that will never change, and that's God's fame. Whether you want to admit it or not, our society is obsessed with famous people. Right now, we're actually obsessed with how annoyed we are with all of the celebrities or famous people that are complaining or encouraging us to stay home just like they do, while they live in their multi-million-dollar homes with pools and bowling alleys in their basement. We're obsessed with famous people. But even the people who are famous now were not famous when I was your age. Or the people that were famous when I was your age are not famous today. But God, inarguably the most famous being of all time, will never change as the generations do. And in the book of Psalms, we find a prayer, and we don't know who wrote this prayer. It could have been David. It could have been Moses. We don't know who wrote this psalm. But this very weak and afflicted person says this, God, your fame will endure every generation. I want you to check out the song in the description for more on exactly what God is famous for if you don't know. And then what I want you to do is I want you to text your small group leader, because first of all, they miss you and they want to hear from you. And for a change, I want you to ask them a question. And I want that question to be, hey, when you were my age, what was different about the world? And then ask them how God hasn't changed between when they were your age and now. Take it a step further and ask your parents, ask your grandparents, drop some questions in the comments and ask me. I'd love to answer them. And let's have some fun reminiscing about all of the changes that have happened throughout our history, and then be encouraged by God's unchanging nature through it all.